This is the Roman Empire, and this is a distinct lack of the Roman Empire. From the fall of Rome until only 150 years ago, Italy didn't exist as a country, but was fractured among dozens of different kingdoms, principalities, city-states, trade republics, theocracies, and all the like. I mean, chances are, if it's a type of government, it's probably been tried at least somewhere on this peninsula. So, what kept Italy divided for so long? How did it come together? And how does this legacy of division and reunification shape the country we see today? This video wasn't sponsored by anyone, but it turns out telling people to subscribe early in the video was the secret to getting me over 250,000 subscribers. So thank you everyone for that, and be sure to leave questions below for a future Q&A video, and in the meantime I'll try to figure out more organic ways of telling people in the video to subscribe without it being annoying. While the Italian Republic of today comprises nearly the entirety of the peninsula, plus some additional pieces like Sicily and Sardinia, Italy's divided legacy is still visible to this day. Not just in the existence of San Marino and Vatican City, but in the sheer diversity still seen across the country. But first, let's back up a little bit. 2,500 years ago, the Italian peninsula was far from unified. Before this particular small city-state near the center would take over the whole thing, modern-day Italy was inhabited by everyone from Celtic tribes such as the Veneti and the Ligurians, the Etruscans, a non-Indo-European language-speaking civilization that would greatly influence a young Rome, and whose name ultimately lent itself to their home region of Tuscany, the Latins throughout the center, and with the south under the domain of the wider Hellenic world, with influences still seen today in cities like Neapolis, or Napoli, and Agropoli, which should sound familiar to anyone who's ever heard of an ancient Greek Acropolis. Over the centuries though, Rome would spread its influence across the peninsula, slowly at first, and then suddenly expanding incredibly quickly across the entire Mediterranean from what was effectively the center of the massive sea, which they naturally also saw as the center of the world, hence Meta-Terra. I've at least found that a useful way to remember how to spell it. Now, I have been wanting to make another video about the geography of the Roman Empire at some point. Do let me know in the comments if that piques your interest, but Rome's time in the spotlight wouldn't last forever, as the Western Roman Empire would fall to Odoacer in AD 476. Though that's not exactly the full story. For one, the average Italian at this time probably wouldn't have noticed all that much of a difference, but regardless, only a few years later, the peninsula would be retaken by the Roman Empire, now seated in Constantinople. While the peninsula may have once more been under Roman control, the city of Rome's population had floundered over the past 2 centuries, to the point where the ruins of the once proud Forum became little more than a scenic place to herd sheep. To answer why Italy was divided for 1300 years though, we have to look not just within Italy, but also all around it. The whole venture of reconquering and maintaining its grasp over Italy, however, proved an incredibly expensive one for Constantinople, and then everything changed across the peninsula when the Lombard nation attacked, swiftly taking over much of northern Italy. The Lombard kingdom would continue to hold its ground against the Byzantines. However, when King Desiderius conquered Rome, Pope Adrian I issued a call for help to Charlemagne, who promptly broke his alliance with the Lombards to swoop in and absorb the Lombard kingdom into the kingdom of the Franks. Okay, note to self, never play Crusader Kings with that guy. And indeed, it was Adrian's successor, Leo III, who would crown Charlemagne Emperor of the Romans, effectively beginning the power dynamic between the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor that would dominate Central European politics for the next 1,000 years. By this point, a clear north-south divide began to emerge. While the fractured kingdoms, city-states, and republics of the north would endure repeated wars and invasions, most of them were under the control of the Holy Roman Empire, though the HRE was at pretty much the opposite end of the centralization spectrum from the actual Roman Empire. Which still exists, by the way. We're right here. Nope, your ruler's a girl, you don't count. The northernmost region of Italy today, the flat, fertile Po Valley, contains nearly half of Italy's population and more than half of its GDP. The Po Valley is bounded on the north and west by the Alps, a shield which was totally at no point ever broken through by a famous general, on the east by the Adriatic, and to the south by the Apennines, which in turn span the entire peninsula, from Liguria to Calabria, effectively splitting it in two, or at least making land travel anywhere south of Emilia-Romagna incredibly difficult. These mountains, however, did provide good defensive positions, as cities' main priorities shifted from access to trade and resources to not being conquered for the 27th time this century. And those cities that didn't situate themselves high in the mountains or behind massive walls instead found other ways of defending themselves, more specifically Venice and Genoa, both located in great places not to be conquered, both in terms of geographical defense, what with Venice's water and Genoa's mountains, and with not having all that many natural resources to make it worthwhile. The problem is, they aren't all that rich in natural resources and can't really expand inland. However, they both prove to be effective seaports. Thus, defensive positions, plus seaports, plus caught between several squabbling powers, plus a hint of people who actually know what they're doing, equals trade republics. The North and the South would continue to develop in vastly different ways, as the North begat ever-influential seats of power, increasingly intertwined with the affairs of Western Europe, while the South would be ruled by different outside monarchs, seemingly switching its allegiance every 200 to 300 years. And just like in ancient times, southern Italy and Sicily would be far more influenced by the powers of the Aegean Sea and North Africa. It's just that this time it was the Eastern Roman Empire and whichever Arab kingdom was in power over Tunisia that day, rather than the Greek city-states and Carthage, but, similar dynamic. Now, despite how the region has looked on basically any data map as of late, by which I mean the past few hundred years, around this time, southern Italy and Sicily were far richer and more prosperous in comparison with the north. However, their fortunes would change, first in the area's political shift from the middle of the Mediterranean world to the edge of the Western European world under French and Spanish monarchs, and later with the Industrial Revolution and a gradual shift away from an agricultural economy. Now, this is supposed to be a geography video, not a history of Italy documentary. If you can believe that, my script sort of got out of hand there. But in an oversimplified series of events, Napoleon conquered everything, and through that sort of pushed a giant reset button across most of Central Europe. Although Napoleon's grasp over Europe fell apart just as quickly as it began, with Austria effectively taking control over most of Italy, this brief era saw several reforms and the introduction of new liberal ideas, including the idea of Italian nationalism, or the idea that Italy should be a nation. The gears of unification were put into motion with the revolutions of 1848, which saw popular revolutions across much of Europe, actually somewhat reminiscent of the Arab Spring in 2011. And began a period of Italian history known as the Risorgimento, or Restoration, with the distinctly non-Austrian Kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont taking over most of the rest of the peninsula in the Second and Third Italian Wars of Independence. The puzzle was finally finished with the conquest of the Papal States in 1870, when Italy finally got the boot, which is incidentally the end of that 1,302 years number I used in the title. Thus, the Kingdom of Italy was born, not to be confused with the Lombard Kingdom of Italy, or the Kingdom of Italy under the Holy Roman Empire, or the Kingdom of Italy that Napoleon tried to get started, or even necessarily the modern Republic of Italy, though that one's at least a continuation of this one. But divided or not, Italy proved to be a very difficult country to industrialize. For one, the Italian peninsula has very little in the way of natural resources, let alone coal reserves, and the coal it does have is of very low quality, meaning that the Italian market wasn't able to make use of steamships and railroads in quite the same way as their northwesterly neighbors, at least not at first. Although the North and even Naples were able to become industrial centers, unification also upended the feudal system that had overseen southern Italy for centuries. However, this didn't necessarily mean that the farmers got the land that once belonged to the king of the lords. The southern region of Apulia was, and in many cases still is, the breadbasket of Italy. But some industrialization plus some canals, square root centuries of technological difference, equals being outcompeted by the Po Valley. This poor land management led to southern Italy's agricultural industry being outcompeted, not just by the North, but even by imports from the United States. As a result, farms grew smaller and less productive, and with a not as diverse economy to fall back on, combined with an unhealthy dose of pseudo-scientific racism against Southerners, all this drove many in the South to leave the country altogether, in particular for the New World, with millions immigrating to the US, Canada, Brazil, and Argentina, where their descendants still make up a large portion of the population to this day. Oh, hello there. One of the most important pieces of the unification puzzle, though, was the language, or rather, languages. You see, Italy is a diverse mix of different dialects, as Dante Alighieri once described the peninsula as the land of 1,000 languages, though I don't think he meant a literal 1,000. However, to say Sicilian or Venetian are dialects of Italian isn't completely true. They're Italian dialects, sure, but the language we know and study today on Duolingo as the Italian language was initially based on just one of these many dialects, specifically the Florentine form of the Tuscan dialect that got shaped and molded into a standardized national language, borrowing words and phrases from some of the different dialects. Yet what truly helped cement the place of the new common language was the advent of commercial television in the 1950s, in large part through the newly created Radio Televisione Italiana, or RAI. with shows like Non è mai troppo tardi, or It's Never Too Late, helping millions learn to read and write. Despite all this, Italy's internal diversity still stands strong to this day, while still forging its identity as a unified country. However, its biggest domestic challenge still remains integrating the North and the South economically. A perhaps telling example of this is how there still isn't a bridge connecting Sicily to the rest of Italy, even though you can literally see one side from the other. You can take a train from one side to the other, but that train will be put on a boat, which is cool and all engineering-wise, but not really a great way to keep a country together. Proposals have been put in place, well, technically since the Punic Wars, but plans have always been scrapped, be it due to the burdensome cost, or fears of the Mafia taking over the bridge, or building a bridge directly over a very active earthquake zone. But the current government seems to be giving it another crack, so we'll see where that goes, I guess. While southern Italy lags far behind the north in GDP per capita, the Human Development Index, and suffers a far higher crime rate, particularly once again with organized crime, I think it's just important to highlight that southern Italy is not some sort of super dangerous do-not-go destination. It's poor, but like, compared to the rest of Western Europe, one of the richest regions on the planet. So if you're going there, my advice would be the same as for anywhere else. Just try not to be stupid and you'll be fine. Either way, I'll probably have to come back to this topic in the future. This video is already long enough, at least for my videos. There was so much I had to cut from this video, you have no idea. Anyway, like this video and subscribe for more, I guess?